day 8. I'm trying a new mic setting this time. Let me know if it sounds better or worse. I think it sounds better, but it'd be good to get your feedback as well. Okay, so yesterday we started working on that graphical bug that we introduced where we had text overflowing. We also styled some stuff and made it look a little bit better. Today we're gonna dive straight into push notifications. This is gonna be technically local notifications, not push notifications, but they're the same thing from a user's perspective. Local notifications come from the device. Push notifications come from an outside server somewhere. We don't want to mess with an outside server. We don't need to. We can keep our project simple. So we're going to use local notifications, and that'll make that nice and easy. Okay, let's get started. Okay, Flutter local notifications. So this is the package that we're going to use. I'm going to refresh the page. This has been up for a day now. Okay, I just wanted to see if there was any new updates. There's a lot here. Most of today's video is going to be following the guide here and making sure that we do the things that we need to do to make this work properly. This is an example of what one could look like. We can make ours a little nicer than this. But the fact remains, oh look, they even have Mac and Linux support now too. That's nice. The fact remains that we need to get a push notification working and get it scheduled. Okay, so make sure you're using the latest version of the plugin. Let's go ahead and do that, right? So we're gonna go to the installing tab. We're gonna grab Flutter local notifications. Go into VS Code. We're gonna open pubspec.yaml. Also, by the way, I do this a lot. You have a file navigator over here. If you're not familiar with VS Code, you can find your pubspec in here. It's towards the bottom of the list usually. Or you can do what I do, which is on Mac, I hit Command P, which is search files by name, and then I just type the thing that I want, and then hit enter, and it opens it for me. On Windows, I think it's Control P, so play around with that as well, and become more efficient in your editor. That's always a great skill to have. Okay, so we've added Flutter local notifications. Again, I have a Flutter plugin that whenever I save my pubspec, it will fetch my dependencies for me. So I don't have to do this manually. It tells me what you need to run in the command line too. This is what it's running. So if you don't have this installed, you can go here and run flutter pub get. Theirs is no example, sorry. You can do it without the no example if you want. It doesn't really make a difference in our case. It's just a little cleaner. Also, when talking about this, you can see the things that it adds, right? So it's resolving all of our dependencies. Anything with a plus is new. So we have Flutter local notifications, Flutter local notifications Linux, Flutter local notifications platform interface. We only installed this one, but this package depends on all of these. Okay, and we can see that too. If you're ever curious what packages it depends on, you can see in the pub.dev site, it depends on clock, Flutter, Flutter local notifications Linux, platform interface, time zone. And those are what we installed if we don't already have them installed. So now let's go back to the README. We're gonna jump straight into it with the Android setup. I know we're testing on iOS. Ideally, we will test on both at some point in the future. And I guess we'll probably do a video on that. But the whole point of us using Flutter is that we can ship this to both Android and iOS, so we need to make sure it works for both of them. Okay, I will warn you ahead of time, Gradle is not my forte, so there is a chance we get into a lot of problem solving here, and you get to see what problem solving looks like from my perspective. But for now, what we're gonna do, I'm gonna close all these folders in our file view and find the one that says Android. Normally I would use Command P to find the file, but I want to show you where this is at. So it's Android app build.gradle. Okay, so if we go back here, we can go to Android app build.gradle. It looks like this. It probably doesn't look exactly like what they have in the README. But version 10 plus now relies on desugaring to support scheduled notifications with backwards compatibility on older versions of Android. Developers will need to update their application's Gradle file. Okay, please see the link on desugaring for details, but the main parts would be this. Let's find these blocks. So we have an Android block. Okay, right here. We have a default config block. Okay, that's right here. And we can see that they've added multi-dex enabled is equal to true. This is really out of the scope of our video multi-dexing, but Android has these things called dex files, and that's kind of your application builds out into something called an APK or an app bundle, and they use dex files to sort of organize things. And this is just telling the Android plugin that we want to use multiple dex files if necessary. Without this, you're pretty limited on how big your app can be. This was fine when Android first started because a single dex file had enough space for everything. But now apps are quite big. So we set this to true, and that just makes it so we can use multiple dex files. We never have to interact with them as Flutter developers, like the dex files, they're generated for us. But we do need to kind of be aware of how they work. Okay, compile options. This is probably the one that they're trying to highlight. So let's find compile options. Okay, compile options under Android. It's got source compatibility, target compatibility. Those match. So all we need to do is add the core library desugaring enabled set to true. And then dependencies, we need to add a new dependency down here. So this is an Android-specific dependency. And in fact, it's actually a dependency just for building our application on Android. You can think of this Gradle file as sort of like our pub spec, but specifically for Android. Android can't process our pub spec. Like that, our pub spec file means nothing to Android, and it means nothing to iOS. It's just a universal format that we can work with. And then Flutter can parse that file and then help us manage this whenever we create a new application, for example. Okay, note that the plugin uses Android Gradle plugin 7.3.1 to leverage this functionality. So to err on the safe side, applications should aim to use the same version at a minimum. Let's find out. So this is in a different folder, right? Yes. Okay, so you have two build Gradles. One is for your app, and one is just for the project as a whole. So we want to find the one that's a project as a whole, and we want to make sure we're using com Android tools build Gradle 7.3.1. Com Android tools build Gradle 7.3.0. Let's just update that to 1. I don't think that will cause any issues for us. There have been reports that enabling desugaring may result in Flutter apps crashing on Android 12L and above. This would be an issue with Flutter itself, not the plugin. One possible fix is adding the window manager library as a dependency. More information on this issue here. Interesting. Reproducible on the latest stable and master channels. Only happening when adding core library desugaring enabled set to true. Without the flag, this app runs normally. Okay, so in our case, we're going to go ahead and add that. Generally, it's a good idea to make sure that the issue you're seeing is actually an issue for you before you introduce a fix. But in our case, let's just go ahead and get it done. So we should be able to add that. I believe it's here. Oh no, wait, that's a class path dependency. So implementation dependencies would need to be in our app build.gradle, right? Okay. So I've added that to our apps build.gradle. I think that's the right place. We'll find out soon if not. The plugin also requires a compile SDK version in your application Gradles file set to 33. So we are in our application one. Compile SDK version is set to the Flutter compile SDK version. Unfortunately, I'm not sure what that is for us. We will see. If we run into an issue, we probably need to come in and set this to 33. But it's pointed to our Flutter compile SDK versions. Let's see if we can figure out what that is. I wish there was an easy way to tell. Specified defaults to Flutter compile SDK version. Yeah, that's good. I'd like to know what the Flutter compile SDK version is. Let's try to run Flutter Doctor and see if we can identify that. It might tell us here, it might not. To see all details, run Flutter Doctor V. We might have to do that. Okay, which is not in your current checkout. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, this is not giving me the information that I wanted, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. And let's try to run it with V and see if we get more information. While this runs, I'm going to take a drink of my beverage, so give me 1 second. Okay. Platform Android 33. I think we should be good then. So I think it would be nice if it was very clear. But I think since the platform is Android 33, I think we should be good with the Compile SDK version. Again, we'll just keep an eye out for that, and if we see an error that points to that, we'll come back and update it and just hard code that value if necessary. Okay. Almost finished with Android. So we have to open a file called Android Manifest XML. Your Android Manifest is it's a file, it's an XML file that describes how your application fits together. So a long time ago, when I first started getting into mobile development, all of your Android UIs were built with XML files, and you would use layout inflators, and you would inflate layouts, and people still do this. It's still fine. There are new tools available that, like Jetpack Compose is another one, that allows you to write your layout in Kotlin, the language that Android apps are generally developed in now. You can still use Java too, but what we've been doing with Flutter and Dart, you can think of Kotlin as the Dart for Android specifically. Okay, so this file has information about our application. You can see this also points to our icon. We're not going to change this in the future, but we're going to overwrite the file here in the future. Our application name, so our label, we can change this if we want to, like, I think we can change it to something like that. So let's go ahead and do that while we're here. Intents, things of this nature, Flutter embedding. We need to follow our guide here and make sure that we are adding the appropriate things. So previously the plugin would specify all the permissions required all the features. Previously the plugin would specify all the permissions required of all of the features that the plugins support in its own Android Manifest XML, so that developers wouldn't need to do this in their own app's Android Manifest. The plugin will now only specify the bare minimum in these post notifications and vibrate permissions. For apps that need the following functionality, please add the following to your manifest. To schedule notifications, the following changes are needed. Okay, we want to schedule notifications. Specify the appropriate permissions between the manifest tags. So we'll grab this one. Okay, I'm going to add this at the bottom. So after application, if your app okay, hang on, sorry. This is required so the plugin can know when the device is rebooted. Okay. If the app requires scheduling notifications with exact timings, aka exact alarms, there are two options since Android 14 brought about behavioral changes. So here's something to think about. There's a lot of different ways that you can schedule your applications. They mentioned exact alarms. There's more flexible applications, and these were part of the things that were released in Android Oreo, I believe. I think Android Oreo was the one that had focused on like battery saving and not just letting people get spammed with notifications all the time. Android Dev Oreo. Okay. Make your apps compatible. What's in Android Oreo? Picture-in-picture. Notification channels. Yeah, okay. So this was the Android update that was like, we need to stop letting people get spammed with notifications left and right, and we need to figure out ways to fix battery life issues because applications were running stuff in the background, pinging people with notifications left and right. Notifications had the ability to wake up your phone, so they would wake up your phone, which could trigger more notifications, and it was like a whole ordeal. So they also listed on the side here the behavior changes. So like these, oops, I clicked the wrong one, sorry. Background execution limits, background location limits. These are both privacy and battery power improvements that came out in Android Oreo. Keep in mind, Oreo is a little old now, several years in fact, but these things still exist. So with that in mind, they introduced new permissions like scheduling and exact alarms, things that are more flexible. And I don't think we need an exact alarm. Like, we don't necessarily want to ping people every day at 12 o'clock on the dot, right? We can be flexible. We just want to make sure people get a notification each day. So we don't need exact timings. Okay. We specify that. Specify the following between the application tags so that the plugin can actually show the notifications. So let's grab these. Oh, oops. Okay, so the first one goes between the manifest tags. This one goes before the application tag closes. Okay, and again, I used another hotkey. Instead of Command P, you can do Command Shift P, and it creates a task menu. And then I typed format document, and it formatted this document for me because I have an XML formatter. Take a minute, pause the video if you need. Just make sure that yours looks like this. The formatting is not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same, but you do need all of this content before this closing application tag. Okay, to use full screen intent notifications, use this full screen intent. I don't remember what those are. So let's find out. To send full screen notifications. So I'm guessing that's a notification that takes up the entire screen. We don't want to do that. That seems really obnoxious. So let's not do that. If we find that we do need this for whatever reason, because maybe Flutter, well, this plugin is what handles the notification, so that probably won't be the case, but we can come back and add it. To use notification actions, specify receiver Android exported false. So that the tags in the plugin can process the actions and trigger the appropriate callbacks. I do think we want this. So we're going to grab this and add it between the application tags. So we'll add it right here. And my understanding here is that this allows us to receive when a user clicks on or taps on a notification, and then we can run some code. So in our case, it'll take them to the appropriate screen. And I think that's all we'll need to do there. Okay, developers can refer to the example app's Android manifest XML to see what the end result may look like. That's a great idea. We can look at that too if we find that we need to. From Android 13, API level 33 onwards, apps now have the ability to display a prompt where users can decide if they want to grant app permissions to show notifications. If you're an Android user, you've seen this before. This is where it pops up and says, do you want to allow this app to actually do this thing? To support this, we need to target Android 13 or higher. I think we're good there. Okay, applications can call the following code to request the permission, where request permission is associated with Android Flutter local notifications plugin. Okay. This is actually Flutter code, so we're going to go ahead and add this. I'm going to take this back to main.dart, and I am going to run this. We have a couple different spots. Let's try it right here. Okay, I'm using code actions to import those plugins. Cannot be unconditionally invoked because the receiver can be null. I'm just going to null check it for now. So this won't run if this is null. So if we can't resolve the Android platform specific implementation, this is probably good because on iOS we won't be able to resolve the Android specific notification plugin implementation. So we don't want to run this on iOS. Custom notifications and icon sounds. Notification icons should be added as a drawable resource. We'll come back to this. Let's just get something working first. We don't want full screen notifications. That's fine. Before creating a release, you will need to customize the ProGuard configuration as per this link. ProGuard. Customize which code to keep. Okay, let's see if there's more information on this. Be sure to include this in the keep.xml file. So if you have chosen to use as the notification icon against the official Android guidance, be sure to include this in the keep. Okay, we'll come back to this. So ProGuard is a tool that does a lot of things for Android, but one of the things is that it shrinks your application down, and it tries to minify it, and then also it obfuscates it. So anyone who like reverse engineers your application gets just a mess of code. It's still valid working code, but it's harder for them to follow. It's harder for them to pick apart like things that they're not supposed to see. In our case, we'll come back to this whenever we actually get ready to release our application or we start building a release configuration. We'll deal with that then. Okay, iOS setup. This one actually should be easier if I remember correctly. Add the following lines to the application method in app_delegate_m app_delegate_swift file of your iOS project. Okay, so you'll have one of these. If you started a new project with me and you're on the latest Flutter, you're going to have a Swift file, I believe. An M file would be for, Objective-C, I believe. Yeah, Objective-C, which is the language that iOS apps were originally built with when I first started doing mobile development. And now Swift is a much nicer language that is available to develop iOS applications with. So let's find our app delegate. I'm going to, again, find it. So I'm going to use Command P, go to app_delegate.swift. We have two. We have one for Mac and one for iOS. We're not building a Mac app, so we're just going to worry about iOS for now. So this is a Swift file. So we find the matching Swift file. We'll copy this. And then see an example of this here. I'm going to go ahead and open the example just to make sure we're putting it in the right place. Okay, this is the line that they were talking about. Right? Did I miss something? Okay. Interesting. This is required to make any communication available in the action isolate. We might need this too. Let's just follow the guide for now and do what they have. So in our case, we take this and we paste it right here. Oh, sorry, I meant to format, not open this file. So format, no Swift formatter. Okay, we'll manage. Also, now's a good time to caveat. I've never really, well, I shouldn't say never. I've written maybe 50, 60, maybe 100 lines of Swift in my entire career. So Swift is not my area of expertise. So we will definitely stick as close to the guides as we can. And I have a lot less information about the Swift side of things than I do the Android side of things. I was doing Android apps specifically for a company for a year and some change, a year and a half, I guess. And I've been doing moonlighting Android stuff for many, many years, and basically until I found Flutter, and then I swapped everything over to Flutter. Okay, handling notifications while the app is in the foreground. By default, iOS applications do not display notifications while the app is in the foreground unless configured to do so. That's fine. If you already have the app open, you have already seen the quote. We don't need to give you a push notification. So I think we can skip this section. Before going on to copy and paste the code snippets in this section, double check that you have configured your application correctly. Okay. Notifications can now contain actions, but note that on Apple's platforms, these work only on iOS 10 or newer. Okay, that's fine. These will only run on the main isolate by calling the on_did receive notification response callback. On iOS and Android, these will run on the main isolate. Oh, sorry, Mac and Linux, it'll run on those. On iOS and Android, it'll run on the main isolate if the configuration is specified that the app interface should be shown by specifying Darwin notification action option.foreground option on iOS. Okay. I'm not entirely sure what all this means. So we will troubleshoot as we go. So let's see what we can do. Configuration. Android and Linux do not require any configuration. Okay. For Swift, okay, so iOS will require a few steps. Keep in mind, this is the Objective-C code that we need to do. Those are the steps for Objective-C, but we have Swift in our application. So we'll open app_delegate_swift, this file. Okay, that line, we do need to add it. So we'll go ahead and add this here. And I'll format it so it's at least a little pretty. Okay, and then let's just make sure everything else matches. Super application, did finish launching with options, launch options. Okay, that's good. This shouldn't change. This is the main method. We need to import this. This is required for calling that. Okay. Okay, we've imported that. On iOS, macOS, notification actions need to be configured before the app is started using the initialize method. The notification category will define which actions are available. On Android and Linux, you can put these directly in the classes. Interesting. Okay, I don't think we necessarily need notification actions, so we'll leave that for now. You need to configure a top level or static method which will handle the action. Again, I don't think we need this because we're not doing actions. Okay, let's skip that for now. We can come back to it if we need to. Specifying the actions on notifications. Again, I don't think we need actions. Okay, this is back in Flutter code. So the first step is to create a new instance of the plugin class and initialize it with the settings to use for each platform. I'm going to copy this, we'll paste it, and then we'll change it as necessary. So I'm going to take this back to main.dart. This probably isn't the best place for this anymore because it's getting quite big, but we can plug it in and then we can move things out as we need to. Excuse me. So one of the selling points of having it here, this is already defined on line 15, so we can remove that. On did receive local notification. Okay, so we don't care about Darwin. We don't care about Linux. Oh, iOS is Darwin. We do care about Darwin, sorry. We don't care about Linux. So we can remove this, I believe. Okay. On did receive notification response. Okay, so there's an implementation of that here. I'm going to add this method up here. This is the on did receive notification response. Oh, it needs a context if we're going to push. Let's not for now. Since we don't have any navigation anyways, we just want to see the payload. Did receive callback for handling when a notification when the app is in the foreground. We don't care if the app is in the foreground. In theory, people shouldn't be getting a notification in that case. Int string, string, string. Okay, so we don't care at all. So this is an int, this is a string, this is a string, this is a string. Is this required? No, okay, it's not required. Get out of there. And then we can make that const in that case, which is nice. And this whole thing can be const. And then that makes this const, which means this can be const, which means we don't need the word here and we don't need the word here. Okay, minor cleanup. Perfect. In the real world, this payload could represent the ID of the item you want to display the details of. We just want to make sure the user ends up in our application, so we probably don't need to worry about that. Okay, requesting notification permissions. The constructor for the Darwin initialized setting class has 3 parameters: request sound permission, request badge permission, request alert permission. That controls which permissions are being requested. If you want to request permissions at a later point in your application on iOS, set all of the above to false. Okay, I think we want to request, so we want the alert permission, we want the badge permission maybe, and we'll leave the sound permission for now simply because we don't have a sound file. Okay. Okay, we are calling initialize, then call the request permissions method at the desired point at an appropriate point in your application. So in our case, we want to request permissions at an appropriate point. So we could do that here. We could do that in the quote view. We have a lot of options. I think what we'll probably do is do it in the quote view. So what we'll do for now is in a init state, we will request permissions. So here's iOS. Okay. We'll need to do a couple things. So we will import this iOS Flutter local notifications plugin. We will grab, in our main.dart, we have this defined. We will need to redefine it. So this, and maybe this is a sign that we should actually do this in our quote view, but we'll come back to that. Let's go ahead and resolve this as part of the state. Okay. We can't await in an init state. Or actually, I guess we technically can, right? Make this async. Okay. This isn't necessarily a bool. It's maybe a boolean. It could also be null if we can't resolve the iOS specific settings. Okay. Returns the iOS implementation of the plugin. Okay. Displaying a notification. So we have these. What we want to do is we really want to schedule a notification. So what we want to do, starting in version 2.0 of the plugin, scheduling now requires developers to specify a date and time relative to a specific time zone. This is to solve issues with daylight savings time. Okay. Run a new zone scheduled method. Sorry, a new zone scheduled method is provided that expects an instance of TZ date time. Even though the time zone package is a transitive dependency via this plugin, it is recommended based on this lint rule that you also add the time zone package as a direct dependency. Once the dependency has been added, usage of the time zone package requires initialization that is covered in the package's README. The following examples are used, so we need to import this. Okay, we need to initialize the time zone database. So we can also do that in maybe a init state. Okay. Once the time zone database has been initialized, developers may optionally want to set a default location time zone. Doesn't provide a way to obtain the current time zone on the device, so developers will need to use platform channels or other packages that may be available. Flutter time zone is the current version of the original plugin using the example app. We'll just leave it without a default value for now. As long as people get a notification each day, that's good enough for us. Assuming the local location has been set, you can call zone scheduled like so. Okay. Periodically show a notification with a specified interval. Repeating true. Okay, let's take this approach. So now that we're here, we have our Android notification details, our notification details. This is just for Android, isn't it? iOS takes in, I would assume, iOS notification details. So let's add those. Const iOS notification. No? What is this? Darwin notification details. Darwin notification details. Darwin notification details. Darwin notification details. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. And then this takes in present alert, present badge, present sound, present banner, present list, subtitle, category identifier, interruption level. So we want a subtitle, right? So our subtitle would be something like, so we need a channel ID and a channel name. So our channel ID would be something like Philosopher's Stone 1. Then we need a channel name. Daily reminders. Okay. repeating title, repeating body. Okay, we don't need a subtitle here. I'm curious, so on Android requires additional setup steps. We might not actually need these Darwin notifications. Let's try it without, and we can just add that if we find that we do need them. Okay, allow while idle is deprecated. We'll get to that in a minute. Periodically show. So this is an ID. 0 is fine. The ID is kind of like an identifier for each notification. So depending on the value you have set there, it will allow notifications to overwrite an existing one or stack. So you could have like a notification stack. That actually is done by different IDs on the same channel, I believe. Okay, so Flutter local notification plugins. We need to give this a title. So we'll say daily, actually not daily reminder. Let's say Philosopher's Stone. Take a moment to reflect on today's quote. Let's try that. So this will periodically show. We have a repeat interval every minute. Let's try this for now and make sure that it actually works. Every minute is one of the options. Daily is what we want, but let's try every minute and just make sure that it works. Okay, we've done a lot. Let's restart our application and see if it's broken. There's a good chance it will be. Okay, no implementation found for method initialize on channel local notifications. Heard. No implementation for method found. Yep. Okay, I'm just gonna stop this. Oh, this is a really good point. So where's that at? So you can group them. Yeah, this talks about grouping notifications if you want to do that. Android grouping, canceling, deleting notifications. Okay. Plugin class is not static. So what we want to do here is I'm going to run Flutter clean. This will take a minute. So Xcode, as I mentioned in a previous video, is kind of like the tool used for developing iOS apps. Flutter makes it so we don't have to use that, which is really nice, and it manages that for us. So you can see it's cleaning the Xcode workspace. And then we want to run Flutter build iOS. I'm going to take a drink while this runs. It'll take a minute. Okay. Still taking a minute. Pod install. This is what we really want to see. So Flutter's package JSON. Okay, yeah, we'll have to do this too. Flutter's package JSON not package JSON. PubSpec YAML is dependencies for our Flutter toolchain and our Flutter application. Some of those may specify iOS dependencies via a tool called CocoaPods, and some of them may specify Android dependencies through a tool called Gradle. We have to, for iOS, Flutter's very good on Android, and it will take care of managing that for us. But sometimes we have to manage our iOS dependencies a little more manually, and Flutter clean and Flutter build will clean everything that's existing. So clean just removes all the previously built stuff, and then build will try to build the app, which includes installing pod dependencies. Okay. We don't have to solve this issue right now. That would be for building an actual application that we want to distribute. In our case, we should just be able to run this again in debug mode, and hopefully we get further along. And if not, we just get to spend the next block of time troubleshooting. Let's see if it works. This might take a minute too because we did clean everything, so it's got to build files that help it load faster whenever you are starting, like doing a hard reload. So this could take a minute too. Also, my CPU is like maxing out, so hopefully the video quality is not too bad. We'll wait for this for just a second and we will see how things turn out. this is taking a moment. Xcode build done, 43 seconds. That's the main chunk of work. So yep, and it just refreshed. Okay, it would like to send us notifications. I'm going to say allow. A init state return to future. It must be a void method without an async keyword. Rather than awaiting on asynchronous work directly inside init state, call a separate method to do this work without awaiting it. Okay, that's fine. We can do that. That's a mistake on my end. So if we go back to our quote view, we made this async. We can't make this async. So what we can do instead, in fact, we probably should do this. We can grab all of this, including the initialized time zones. And since that's not relevant to what the user's seeing on the screen, we don't want to do it in an init state because it will prevent the view from rendering until that stuff finishes, and it doesn't affect the view. So what we can do instead is call another method called setup notification scheduling, and then we can define a method called setup notification scheduling. Okay, we'll make this async, and then we'll paste our code right here. Okay, let's give this another shot. I'm gonna reload. Ooh, that seems maybe promising. Okay, I'm gonna do one more thing before we get into this. Excuse me. I'm gonna grab all of this and I'm gonna wrap it in a try, paste it, and then outside the try, I'm gonna add a catch. I really have no idea where the level of expertise my audience is right now. So I sometimes am explaining things that probably don't need to be explained. This is probably a really good example of that, but just in case, a try takes all the code in this body right here, this block, and tries to run that code. If at any point any of this code throws an exception, we catch it, we stop executing. So if this throws an exception, we won't run this. This will have already been ran, so there's nothing we can do about that. This won't run if this throws an exception. That exception then goes into this catch, and then we can do stuff in the catch. So in our case, what we want to do is print. I just want to print E. And not only print E, but I'm going to throw a debugger on this, and I want to know if we hit this case. So init state won't trigger again until we do a reload. So let's do a reload. Okay, we did a reload. We didn't hit this catch. That's a pretty good sign. I'm going to minimize this application, and we're going to hang out for a minute. Maybe, you know, you can tell me about your day. I can tell you about my day, but we need to wait a minute until we get hopefully we get a push notification. So yeah, you start. Tell me about your day. Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, this is silly. I'm not going to continue with that. But while we're waiting for this to see if the push notification comes in, we can talk a little bit about, well, what should we talk about? We have a lot of options. Requesting permissions is probably an important thing to be aware of. Your application has access to a very wide set of functionality on iOS and Android. But you have to request it. The reason why is that you don't, hey, it came through. I'm going to click that. We'll come back to that in just a second. And it brings us back to the app. Everything is working like we would expect it to be. That is awesome. So now what we can do is we can change this to be daily. So this will come in once a day, which is excellent. It has an ID of 0. So if we were to run this again, the last time we run this, it'll be 24 hours after the last time this block of code executes. So we have a couple things we could do to clean this up, and we've been going on for a while now, so we will probably do this tomorrow. But one thing we want to do is we want to not hound our user with notifications or permission requests for notifications, right? So if you say no, unless this plugin magically takes care of this behind the scenes, which I don't think it does, if you say no and then you open the app again, it will prompt you again. And then if you say no again and then you open the app again, it will prompt you again. And if you say no and you open the app again, it'll prompt you again. And the point that I'm getting at is like, that's really annoying. So if I say no, my app should respect that. You should also provide users a way to change their mind. So maybe what we'll do is plan on maybe tomorrow adding a icon up here for a gear that takes the user to a settings view. So I guess maybe we will do a little bit of navigating too, which is kind of exciting. So we'll have to handle that. And yeah, I think that covers it. We don't use this result, so let's clean up some code while we're here, and then we will probably wrap up for the day. It might not be a bad idea to take a look at this. So it says, Philosopher's Stone, take a moment to reflect on today's quote. That's pretty good. I was a little worried that repeating description might be an issue. We do probably want to change this so it's a little more valuable to our users. And where they would see this, sorry if you keep hearing that chime, that is the notification coming in and my Mac making noise. So let's just turn that down. So, okay, so channel description. We want daily reminders to reflect on today's quote. This is something that pops up in the settings view or the notifications view under settings on Android. iOS probably has something similar. The point here is it lets the user know what these notifications are so they can decide if they want to keep them on or not. Okay, so this is something that we probably should sort out. This is deprecated, so if you see a slash through it like this, that means the library, the user who maintains the library has marked this as deprecated and that it shouldn't be used. Deprecated in favor of the Android schedule mode parameter. Let's add this. Let's hover over it to see what it is. It's an Android, schedule mode. We can do, okay. Yeah, okay, so this was the exact timing and the alarm clock type stuff that I was talking about a while back. Let's circle back to that really quick. So on Android and Oreo, they had the scheduling changes, the notification changes, and the background task changes. So you have options. You can schedule, if you were building an alarm clock application, you want to use the alarm clock schedule. This tells Android that I need this to go off at the exact time. If you set an alarm for 8:30 and your alarm goes off at 8:39, that's probably not what you want, unless you're one of those new wave alarm clock apps that try to determine how your sleep is going and anyways, wake you up at the right time in your sleep. That might be more valuable. But in our case, we don't want the alarm clock. We also don't want exact. The difference between these two is that it'll show, the alarm clock will show at the exact time specified and will execute while the device is in low power. So like this would be great for a medication reminder. Exact would be, it will execute at the exact time, but may not execute while device is in the low power idle mode. This is the same thing, except it will execute while the device is in low power mode. So in this case, like you might use this for something that's important, but not important if the phone is about to die. It's kind of hard to come up with a really good example for that. I guess what's coming to mind for me is think of like Uber or Lyft, and when they say your driver is approaching, if my phone is at 1% battery or 2% battery, and you tell me that my driver is approaching and that notification is what kills my phone, it will make it very hard for me to actually get a notification with my driver's information once they've arrived. So like you might not do, you might do exact for your driver's close, and you might do exact allow low power mode when it's your driver's here. Like your driver's here, let's go. And exact is what we want. We don't really care. It just needs to be delivered today and tomorrow and the next day, and we're pretty flexible with that. In fact, this is actually really considerate of us because we're not trying to wake the device up to send this notification. It'll get to it whenever it can. So it basically, another really nice thing about this is that these notifications tend to come in when the user's using their phone. So they're already doing something on their phone and then they get that notification. So it's not something that like a notification will hit, they don't have their phone on them, they're not gonna see it when they get back because they have 100 other notifications. So yeah, anyways, we're gonna do this. We don't want low power mode. If the user's device is about to die, they don't need to reflect on this quote. That's not important. It's more important that they have the battery to make a phone call if they need to, or send a text or anything like that. Okay, I've been talking a lot. So that fixes our deprecation issue because this replaces that old value. We probably don't need this try catch, but it's not a bad idea to leave it. There's a lot of code that could fail here. So example, this first line throws a time zone init exception when something is wrong. This could throw an exception when resolving. Let's keep the try catch for now. And maybe if we do Crashlytics or error reporting, we can look at adding stuff here to capture that. Great, so we have our push notification. Let's make a plan for tomorrow, and tomorrow will be to make our notification look a little prettier, maybe add an app icon, and then maybe add an app icon for our application. And then if we have time, we'll add a gear up here, we'll navigate to a new view, and then we will show the user some settings. And we'll start building that screen at least. And then we can look at a good way to store that data, maybe not in Hive, or maybe in Hive. We'll kind of take it by, play it by ear and see what we end up going with. Also, today's quote, I didn't mention it. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. Love that. Okay. I'm back. This one's been long. Thank you for sticking with me. Notifications are a beast in any platform. It's one of the more complicated platform interactions. So a platform interaction would be doing something in Flutter. Flutter's here, the platform's here, doing something that can't be handled by Flutter and has to be handled by the platform itself. And I guess while we're talking about that, and since this is long, let's keep going. The way that works is Flutter passes a message to the platform, and there's code that is written by libraries like Flutter local notifications. That code has a listener for that message. So that's how you communicate between Flutter and the existing platform. That allows you to use iOS code in Flutter applications, Android code in Flutter applications. So if you have a really great library that does everything you need, you can use it. It works out really well. You just have to write a nice little adapter layer between the two. Okay, we talked about what we're doing tomorrow. Pretty excited about that. Hopefully you are too. I guess it's time to say goodbye. But before I do, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, there's a bell. If you hit that, you'll get notified of whenever there are new videos in this playlist and new videos that I put out in general. Let me know your thoughts on this one. This was a little longer. Also, new mic setting. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I think it's better, but you tell me. And then lastly, I just mentioned this, but there's a playlist. So if I can figure out how to put a card, nope, this side. I will put a card right up here with that playlist. So if you want to find all of these videos in one place or share that, that is where you can do that. All right, thank you so much. I will stop taking up your time. Enjoy your weekend and happy holidays.